The Tevarin Confederacy had reached its breaking point. Their once great homeworld was dying, and nothing they did could stop it. For decades, they had fought wars over land, food, and power. The soil had turned to dust, oceans had turned black, and the air itself had become poison. From orbit, the planet looked like a fading ember. Dark clouds covering the surface, storms tearing through broken cities. People were starving, sick, and hopeless. In one last act of desperation, the Tevarin Council gathered for what they knew might be their final meeting. The leaders stood around a cracked hollow table, faces thin and pale under the dim light. Their generals had no soldiers left to fight. Their scientists had no more resources to save the planet. There was only one option left: to ask for help. The message they sent into the void was short and simple. It wasn't a demand or a negotiation. It was a plea. Any assistance available. Our people are dying. Please help us. That signal traveled across the galaxy. It reached dozens of star systems, passing through trade routes and neutral zones. Every government that received it read the message and turned away. Some said they couldn't afford to help. Others simply didn't care. A few debated in their grand councils about the political consequences of saving a dying species. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, no one came. The Tevarin citizens waited. They watched the skies, hoping to see the bright flare of a rescue ship entering orbit, but none arrived. Their allies ignored them. Their rivals laughed, saying it was nature's way of ending a failed race. And then, when everyone else had given up hope, a single signal came through. It was short, direct, and carried no official seal, just a voice clear and calm. "This is Earth. We received your distress call. We are coming." At first, no one believed it. Earth, the humans? The name was barely known outside the Rim territories. Most of the galaxy saw them as a young, primitive race, new to space, too emotional, too reckless. But a few old traders remembered stories. They whispered about humans being strange, fierce creatures from a world so dangerous that everything there tried to kill them. The word used to describe Earth was Death World, a planet filled with predators, poisons, and storms that could wipe out entire regions. The Tevarin scientists pulled up what little data they had on humans. They were small compared to most species, fragile-looking, living on a planet with unstable weather and violent seasons. Yet somehow they had not only survived, they had thrived. Their history was full of wars, disasters, and comebacks. Every time nature tried to wipe them out, they came back stronger. Every time they fell, they rebuilt. Some on the Tevarin Council argued that it was a trick, that humans couldn't possibly send help across the stars. Others laughed bitterly, saying that if the humans were truly from a death world, then maybe they'd come to loot what little was left. But the desperate ones didn't care anymore. If even one ship came, it would be something. Weeks passed again. The planet continued to decay. Ash storms rolled across continents, turning day into night. The last of their crops failed. The Tevarin could hear the cries of children through their city speakers, a sound that haunted every moment of silence. Then one morning, something happened that none of them expected. The sky split open. It started with a shimmer, then a flash brighter than the sun. One, two, then hundreds of massive objects appeared in orbit, shapes unlike anything the Tevarin had seen before. Their sensors lit up in confusion. The readings were impossible. The ships were enormous, far more advanced than anything the Tevarin military had ever built. And there were so many of them. Panic spread through the population. Some thought it was an invasion. Others dropped to their knees, believing it was divine intervention. The council chambers filled with shouts. "Who are they? What do they want? Is this Earth's fleet?" A broadcast signal came through every frequency on the planet. Steady, calm, and unmistakably human. "To the Tevarin Confederacy. We received your message. Assistance is inbound. Do not resist, do not resist." Those 3 words froze everyone. The human voice carried no arrogance, no threat, only certainty. It sounded like someone who didn't ask for permission. From orbit, the human ships began to move. Massive carriers released waves of smaller craft, each descending through the thick clouds of ash. Some headed toward cities, others toward industrial zones or farmland. Instead of weapons, they carried machines, drones, construction units, and atmospheric processors. Within hours, the gray skies began to clear as the humans started repairing the damage the Tevarin had caused to their own world. But not everyone was grateful. Some of the surviving warlords saw this as a chance to seize power. They tried to take control of the landing zones, firing on the human machines. That was when the Tavaran finally saw what kind of help had come. High above the planet, one of the massive human ships turned slightly, aligning its cannons. There was no warning shot, no negotiation. A beam of light struck from orbit, and within seconds the warlord's fortress was gone, vaporized, erased as if it had never existed. The message was clear. Humanity was here to help, but on their own terms. The Tavaran people watched in awe as the humans worked with impossible speed and precision. Entire districts were cleared of toxic debris overnight. Power grids that hadn't functioned in years were suddenly alive again. Hospitals were rebuilt, and within days the first Tivarine children were breathing clean air for the first time in their lives. For the first time in generations, the Tivaran began to believe in tomorrow again. And though they still feared the humans, they couldn't deny what they were seeing. An army that came not to conquer, but to save. No one knew why Earth had answered when no one else did. Some said humans had an old saying, "You don't ignore a cry for help." Others thought they simply wanted to prove something to the galaxy. But the truth didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that when every other world turned its back, humanity came. And the Tivarine learned what that really meant. When the Tivarin first saw the humans arrive, they could hardly believe what they were seeing. They had expected maybe a few medical ships, some cargo freighters filled with food, or a handful of volunteers. Instead, their skies were filled with thousands of ships. Huge shadows passed over the ruined cities as the fleet entered orbit, endless lines of starships stretching from horizon to horizon. There were vessels of every kind. Some were sleek and white, shining softly against the darkness of space, medical and aid carriers built to save lives. Others were enormous, dark, and armed with weapons that made the Tavaran military look like children with sticks. These were dreadnoughts, floating fortresses that hummed with quiet energy. The people below stared in silence, unsure whether to cheer or hide. A message soon appeared on every communication screen, every radio, every hollow device on the planet. It was a human voice, calm but firm. "We received your call for help. We're here to stabilize your world." Those simple words echoed across the ruined cities. For the first time in years, the Tivarin dared to hope, but also to fear. No one had ever seen a fleet like this. If this was what humans called help, then what did they call war? Within hours, the first human ships broke formation and began descending through the clouds. Massive dropships pierced through the ash and smoke, their engines roaring like thunder. The Tavaran watched in amazement as they landed in the middle of broken cities, not to fight but to rebuild. The humans didn't waste time giving speeches or holding meetings. They simply got to work. Entire battalions of engineers stepped out of their ships with machines that the Tivarine had never seen before. Drones that hovered like insects, robotic arms that folded and unfolded into construction units, and mobile reactors that glowed with clean blue energy. The Tivarine people gathered in the streets as they watched humans repair what decades of war had destroyed. Power grids that had been dead for years came alive again with a hum. Buildings that had collapsed were lifted back into place by machines working in perfect sync. Rivers that had turned black from pollution were filtered back to clear blue. For the first time in generations, light returned to the Tivarin cities, but peace never came easily on Tivarin Prime. When the human aid began flowing, the surviving warlords of the planet saw opportunity. They had ruled through fear and chaos, hoarding supplies while millions starved. Now they saw the humans, machines, and food as new things to control. Several warlords sent their militias to seize the landing zones, hoping to capture the human technology. They fired at drones, blocked roads, and claimed entire sectors of the city as their own. The humans gave a single warning: do not interfere with stabilization operations. The warlords ignored it. Moments later, the sky changed. From orbit, a bright light flashed, silent, blinding, and final. The warlord compounds vanished in a burst of white fire. No debris fell, no explosion spread beyond the target zone. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left but smooth, blackened glass. Across the planet, the fighting stopped instantly. Every rebel, every looter, every corrupt soldier froze. The message was clear: humans didn't negotiate with chaos. They ended it. From that moment on, the humans ruled the skies. Their ships moved with quiet precision, scanning for radiation zones, collapsed tunnels, and unstable reactors. When they found one, they didn't wait for permission. They fixed it. When survivors were trapped, they rescued them. When diseases broke out, they sent down medical drones that floated through the streets like silver angels, spraying air purifiers and distributing vaccines. The Tiverine people didn't know how to react. Some fell to their knees in gratitude, believing humanity was sent by the stars themselves. Others whispered that it was all too much power for one species to have. But no one could deny the results. The world that had been crumbling for a century was being repaired, not by slow committees or endless talks, but by action. The human commanders coordinated it all with perfect calm. They spoke rarely, but every order they gave was followed by results. Rebuild that sector. Stabilize the core. Evacuate Zone 5. They didn't speak like conquerors, yet they didn't ask for advice either. To them, it seemed this was just another day's work, saving a dying world through cold efficiency. Some Tiveran soldiers tried to approach the human officers, asking questions about why they were helping or what they wanted in return. The humans gave the same answer every time. You asked for help. We're helping. There was no greed in their voices, no demand for territory or payment. But there was also no softness. When Tiveran officials tried to argue, saying they should have control over their own rebuilding efforts, the humans ignored them. They had a plan, and they weren't going to let politics get in the way. Within days, the planet began to change. Massive towers rose where rubble once lay. The air grew clearer. Food production stations started feeding millions. The people who had spent their entire lives under war could finally breathe clean air again. But deep down, everyone felt the same chill. This wasn't charity. It was something far more powerful. Humanity's kindness didn't come with weakness. Every move, every decision, every act of help was backed by force so immense that no one dared to resist. The Tiveran realized they were witnessing something far beyond aid. The humans weren't just saving them. They were reshaping the planet with the same precision they used to fight their wars. When they rebuilt, they did it with the same energy they once used to conquer their own chaos. The warlords who survived watched from hiding, terrified. They saw how the humans could turn from healers to destroyers in a heartbeat, and no one could predict them. They could save a child with one hand and vaporize an army with the other. To the Tiveran people, it became clear. Humanity's power was not like anyone else's. It wasn't wild or cruel. It was controlled, focused, cold. Every action was calculated. Every move had purpose. By the end of the week, the wars that had torn the planet apart for decades were over, not through peace treaties or compromises, but through final, decisive action. The humans had done in days what generations of Tiveran leaders had failed to do. They didn't conquer the planet. They stabilized it exactly as they had promised. But even as the cities came back to life, no one could shake the feeling that they had seen something terrifying. The Tiverine had called for help, expecting mercy. What they received instead was something far greater and far more unsettling. They had seen the true face of humanity's power, mercy delivered with precision and peace enforced by unstoppable strength. Across the galaxy, silence fell. Every world, every empire, every government that could see what was happening to Tiveran Prime stopped whatever they were doing and watched. They watched as the human fleets moved across the sky like a storm of light, not in anger but with purpose. Where other species would have sent diplomats, humanity sent fleets. Where others would have held meetings, humanity acted. Every ship moved as if guided by one mind. When resistance appeared, it was erased within seconds. Entire enemy fleets, warlords, pirates, or raiders who thought they could take advantage of the chaos, vanished in blinding flashes of light. There were no threats, no speeches, no negotiations. Just swift, unstoppable action. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. For centuries, most species had fought wars that dragged on for years, always hesitant, always careful not to go too far. But the humans didn't fight that way. Their precision was terrifying. One moment there would be a fleet of hostile ships. The next, empty space. It was as if humanity had decided that hesitation was a cruelty the Tiverine could no longer afford. The phrase shock and awe spread across the news networks of 100 worlds. It became more than words, and it became a reality. Everywhere people looked, they saw images of massive human dreadnoughts hovering over the burning cities of Tiveran Prime, casting shadows that reached miles long. Below those ships, order was returning to a world that had only known chaos. To the Tiveran, it felt like living inside a miracle. Cities that had been nothing but ruins for generations now glowed with light again. Entire neighborhoods that had been buried in rubble were cleared by machines that worked day and night without rest. The air began to clear, the water began to flow clean again, and the endless gray skies started to fade into blue. From the moment the humans arrived, everything changed. They did not sleep, they did not stop. Drones, thousands of them, filled the skies. They hovered through streets, repairing walls, rebuilding towers, planting crops. Massive atmospheric processors released waves of clean air, pushing away the pollution that had choked the planet for decades. And it wasn't just machines. Human medics worked side by side with Tivarin survivors. They treated the sick, fed the hungry, and helped the lost. For the first time in years, hospitals were full not of death but of life. Tivarin children who had grown up knowing only starvation and fear now found food arriving from the sky. Massive supply pods dropped gently into cities, opening automatically to reveal mountains of meals, nutritious, self-heating, and endless. These food systems were so advanced that even the oldest Tivarin scientists couldn't understand them. "This tech is older than our civilization," one engineer whispered. And it was true. Humanity's machines were older than Tivarin history, designed long ago to rebuild entire planets after war. Within a few weeks, the transformation was visible from orbit. The fires were gone. The radiation zones were sealed. The warlords who had once ruled with violence had either fled or vanished. And above it all, the human ships continued to move silently, always watching, always working. The Tivarin people began to worship them in a strange mix of fear and gratitude. To many, the humans looked like angels, not gentle, glowing beings, but powerful guardians of steel and light. When the people walked under the vast shadows of the orbiting dreadnoughts, they felt safe for the first time in their lives. But to their leaders, the situation was confusing. The Tivarin Council decided it was time to thank humanity, formally, properly. They wanted to invite the human commander to the capital, to give a ceremony to express their eternal gratitude. They sent message after message, full of praise and thanks. They waited hours, then days. No reply came, so they tried to locate the command ship in orbit, but when they reached out through every channel, they found nothing. The fleet was still there, still operating, still helping, but there was no leader giving orders. The systems worked automatically. The ships moved in perfect coordination, and the aid continued without pause. It was as if the entire operation had been planned long before the humans even arrived. When a small delegation of Tivarin finally managed to contact a human liaison ship, they were met by a simple message. "Humanity does not seek thanks. We are here to finish the job, that was all. No name, no emblem, no request for payment or recognition." The Tivarin leaders were stunned. No one had ever seen such behavior from another species. Normally, aid came with contracts, alliances, or control. There were always strings attached, always someone who wanted something in return. But the humans didn't ask for anything. They didn't even land in the capital. They stayed above the planet, silent and distant, like guardians who refused to be worshipped. And yet their presence changed everything. The Tivarin began to rebuild faster than they ever had. Human engineers had left behind tools that could replicate themselves, producing more drones, more processors, more energy. The world healed. The people spoke of the humans with awe. Parents told their children about the day the skies filled with light. They told them how the Death Worlders came not as conquerors but as saviors, beings who brought peace, but carried power so great that no one dared challenge them. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, leaders watched nervously. They saw what had happened to Tivarin Prime, how humanity had crushed entire fleets without hesitation, then rebuilt a world without asking for reward. It scared them more than any war ever had, because it meant that humans didn't act out of greed or politics. They acted out of something else, something deeper, something no one fully understood. The galaxy's rulers whispered to one another in their chambers. Some said Earth had done it to prove a point. Others believed it was an experiment, a test of what would happen if humanity chose to help rather than fight. But no matter how they tried to explain it, none could ignore the truth. The humans had rewritten what help meant. They had shown that peace could come through strength, pure, unstoppable, surgical strength. They didn't come to rule or to conquer. They came to end suffering in the only way they knew how, completely. For the Tevarin, it was overwhelming. They had asked for mercy and received it, but wrapped in thunder and fire. Their world was saved, yet they could never look at the stars the same way again. Because now they knew that somewhere out there, among the endless worlds, lived a species from a planet of storms, a species that answered cries for help not with words but with shock and awe. In less than one Tevarin cycle and about a single year by human time, their entire world changed. The difference was so fast and so massive that many Tevarin couldn't even believe it was real. The skies that had been dark and filled with poisonous clouds for decades were now clear and blue. The endless ash storms were gone, replaced by soft rain and clean air. Mountains that had been blackened by war began to show green again. Rivers that once carried only sludge now sparkled like silver threads across the land. For the first time in living memory, the people of Tevarin Prime could see the sun. The rebuilding never stopped. Human machines worked day and night without rest. Massive drones hovered over broken cities, repairing structures with laser precision. Fields that had been barren for years suddenly began to bloom again, as human terraforming systems released nutrients back into the soil. Old factories long destroyed by war came back to life, not to build weapons, but to produce clean energy and farming tools. The Tevarin who had once hidden underground or lived in refugee camps now returned to their homes. They walked through streets that had been rebuilt by unseen human hands. They opened doors to houses that no longer smelled of smoke and rot. There was laughter again, weak at first, but growing every day. Children ran through the streets. Markets reopened. For the first time in generations, the sound of gunfire was gone. It felt like a miracle, but it was also strange. The humans who had done so much rarely showed themselves anymore. In the early days, Tevarin had seen them everywhere. In the skies, in the ruins, in the hospitals. Now the humans were hardly seen at all. The drones and machines continued to work perfectly, guided by silent orders from the fleet above. It was as if the planet was being healed by ghosts. Then, one morning, everything changed again. It started quietly. A few farmers noticed that the lights from the sky, the human ships that had watched over the planet, were fewer than before. At first they thought it was a trick of the weather. But by the end of the day, people began to see the truth. One by one, the massive human ships were leaving orbit. Each departure was slow and silent. The ships would rise higher and higher until they were just bright dots in the sky. Then, with a single flash, they would vanish into faster-than-light travel. At first, the Tevarin panicked. They thought something was wrong. Maybe a new disaster was coming, or perhaps the humans had found a reason to abandon them. The planetary communication channels were flooded with questions. The Tevarin Council sent messages to the human command ship, begging for answers. No reply came. Over the next few weeks, the departures continued. The mighty dreadnoughts that had once blotted out the stars left one after another. Medical ships, construction carriers, and massive orbital factories all disappeared into the deep black of space. Then, finally, the last human ship, the great flagship that had led them all, began to move. It turned slowly, facing the planet one last time. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The skies filled with silence. The Tevarin people gathered in their cities, staring upward, waiting for a message, a farewell. Something. But the humans said nothing. The ship's engines glowed, brighter and brighter until it vanished into the stars like all the others. When the people finally looked up again, the sky was empty. The fleet that had saved them was gone. At first there was confusion. Some Tevarin thought the humans would return. Others believed the work was finished, that humanity had simply done what it came to do. And then, the following day, their satellites detected a new structure in orbit, a massive station left behind by the humans. It was enormous, shining silver in the light of Tevarin's twin suns. It looked part monument, part machine. The scientist quickly connected to its signal, expecting some kind of detailed instruction or message. But there was only one transmission, repeating endlessly in both human and Tevarin language. Help requested. Help delivered. Do better. That was it. No explanation. No signature. No demand for thanks. At first, the words confused the Tevarin leaders. Do better? What did that mean? Some took it as a command, one that humanity expected them to rebuild stronger and wiser. Others saw it as a warning, that they must never fall back into war or greed, or the humans might return in a way they wouldn't like. But most people felt it as a message of faith. Humanity had saved them, then trusted them to stand on their own. The Ta'veren gathered around that orbital monument in wonder. Pilgrimages began. Every year ships would fly up to the station to look at the shining words etched on its side. It became both a symbol of hope and a reminder of shame, because while the humans had saved them, they had also exposed the truth. The Ta'veren had destroyed themselves. Their wars, their greed, their endless fighting, all of it had brought them to the edge of extinction. Humanity had come not only to rescue them, but to show them what true strength looked like. And then, without asking for anything in return, the humans left. The Ta'veren called it the silent departure. Historians, poets, and scientists all tried to explain it. Some said the humans didn't want to interfere further, that they believed every species must rise on its own after being given a chance. Others believed humanity had done it before, that somewhere out there, other worlds had also received help and were now living under similar monuments. Whatever the reason, one truth was clear. The humans had given them everything: food, power, safety, peace, and then walked away without waiting for applause. Years passed. The planet continued to heal. The people rebuilt their society, guided by the lessons humanity had left behind. They outlawed war, dismantled old political systems, and built a new council based on cooperation. And in every school, every city, every home, the message was taught to every child: help requested, help delivered, do better. It became the foundation of their new culture. But deep in their hearts, the Ta'veren knew it was more than just words. It was a challenge, a reminder that they had been saved by a species that came from a world of storms and predators, a species that didn't just promise to help, but acted. And though the humans were gone, their presence was still everywhere. In the machines that still worked perfectly, in the clean air, in the power grids that never failed, and in the quiet hum of the great station above their skies. For the Ta'veren, the humans were both a blessing and a burden. A blessing because they had been saved from extinction, a burden because they would forever live in the shadow of that help. They could never forget the day their skies filled with fire, nor the calm voice that had said, "We're here to stabilize your world." They had been shown mercy wrapped in power, and as the generations passed, every time a child looked up and saw the station gleaming in the sunlight, they were reminded of the promise humanity had left behind, a promise that still echoed across the stars. When you ask for help, be ready to change. When you are saved, be worthy of salvation. Do better. Decades passed, and the story of Earth's intervention on Ta'veren Prime turned into something far greater than just history. It became legend. Across the galaxy, species who had never even seen a human ship spoke of what had happened. It was a tale passed from traders to explorers, from soldiers to children. Every version carried the same tone: awe, respect, and a quiet sense of fear. The Ta'veren themselves rebuilt their civilization stronger than ever, but they never forgot the day the sky burned with light and the humans came. For some, the story was one of hope, a moment when an entire world was saved from ruin. People said that humanity had shown what compassion truly meant, that their help went beyond politics and alliances. They didn't come for wealth, land, or glory. They came because someone asked for help. And yet that help had arrived with such power that it reshaped everything the Ta'veren believed about mercy. Other species saw the story differently. To them, humanity's intervention wasn't mercy at all. It was judgment. They spoke of the terrifying precision with which humans restored peace, the way they ended wars not with treaties, but with overwhelming force. The galaxy had seen countless wars before, but never one that ended so suddenly, so completely. When the humans came, there were no more battles, no negotiations. There was only silence after the storm. The monument they left behind still orbited above Ta'veren Prime, a silent sentinel in the black of space. It bore no flag, no nation's emblem, no grand words carved into its hull. Only one phrase shimmered in both human and Ta'veren script: help requested, help delivered, do better. Those 4 simple words became a lesson that echoed far beyond the Ta'veren system. They carried meaning that no speech or treaty could match. For the Ta'veren, the monument was both a reminder and a burden. Every generation that looked up at the night sky could see it glinting faintly above their world, a constant symbol of what had happened. They owed their survival to Earth, But that debt came with humility. They had seen what human aid truly looked like, swift, unstoppable, and absolute. It wasn't charity. It was transformation, and with transformation came responsibility. Humanity had not stayed to rule nor to demand tribute. They had left behind a single challenge: to do better, to live in a way that would make that help worth giving. As the decades rolled on, the story spread even further. Entire academies studied the Tevarin event, as it came to be called. Some scholars argued it was proof of humanity's moral evolution, that a death-world species had learned to use its strength for good. Others said it was a warning, that humans had simply replaced their old wars with new, cleaner ones fought in the name of peace. Empires that once mocked Earth began to treat it with quiet caution. They didn't send probes near human territory. They didn't test the boundaries, because everyone now knew what happened when humans heard the word help. Even in distant systems, far beyond the Tevarin's reach, people repeated the same saying. When humanity promises to help, mercy and wrath arrive together. It became almost a proverb, a mixture of reverence and fear. Some leaders invoked it to remind their people to treat others with respect. Others whispered it in war rooms, knowing what would happen if Earth ever decided to intervene again. There were those who doubted the story, of course. They claimed it was exaggerated, that no single fleet could rebuild a world so quickly or end a war so completely. But the Tevarin didn't argue. They simply pointed to the monument in their sky, its light still blinking softly, transmitting that same message again and again into the void. And deep within the station's records, there was evidence, footage of the human ships arriving, drones descending, and the ash-filled skies clearing for the first time in generations. The Tevarin children grew up learning about the humans who saved them. In schools, teachers described the day the stars turned bright, the day help arrived in the form of thunder and fire. They were told that the humans weren't gods, but people. People from a world so dangerous it had shaped them into survivors beyond imagination. To the Tevarin, humanity became a paradox. The kindest saviors and the most terrifying warriors, both at once. Generations later, the Tevarin no longer saw the humans as monsters or angels. They saw them as a standard to live up to. Their cities flourished, their skies stayed clear, and their world prospered. But above it all, that silent monument remained, reminding them every day that mercy could come wrapped in power, and that help, when promised by humanity, carried both light and fire. In the end, the story of Tevarin Prime was more than history. It was a message written across the stars, one that every world, every species, every ruler understood in their own way. Some called it hope, some called it a warning, but all agreed on one truth. When humans answer a cry for help, the galaxy never stays the same again.